grams of alcohol in 1 milliliter of blood. So anyway, blood alcohol content of 0.08, a BAC of 0.08. Past that, a person's impaired, and it's illegal for him to drive a vehicle. So how do we measure it? How do we measure the blood alcohol content? Well, the obvious answer is to measure from the blood. Get a blood sample. This is not easy, and we'll deal with that soon. So what we really have to know is how much the brain is impaired by the alcohol. So what we have to do is, operate, remove the brain, test the amount of alcohol in there, and we'll see how much alcohol hit the brain. So we'll know how impaired the person is. This is not feasible unless it's during an autopsy for obvious reasons. So we'll measure the blood, take a blood sample. However, ordinary police officers are not permitted to do this. Taking blood requires licensed medical personnel. Ordinary policemen are not necessarily licensed to do that, and therefore they should not and are not permitted to take blood. So that way it doesn't really work in the field because ordinary policemen can't do this. The truth is, any watery part of the body will absorb the alcohol because remember, the alcohol does not get digested. It slips through everything. Well, okay, that's an exaggeration. It can slip into a lot of watery parts of the body, including the vitreous humor. That's the eyeball, the liquid inside the eyeball. And again, you're not going to do that to anybody alive. So blood is so far the best, but there is another way because, again, we want people who are not necessarily trained medical personnel to be able to analyze how much blood there is in the body. In the field, you're not going to necessarily have trained medical personnel. So they measure it in the breath. As mentioned, the alcohol does slip through all kinds of things and gets into the veins, gets to the heart. The heart pumps blood to the lungs, and it can be detected in the lungs, in the breath. It's still possible. After that, it can go to the brain and everywhere else in the body, and hopefully, gets flushed through the liver and changed and removed and put into the kidneys and taken out. But let's see more in depth this information as to what's going on with alcohol. Okay, so you drink your screwdriver and gets to the stomach, slips into the veins around the stomach, goes into the small intestine, slips into the veins. Now it's in the veins. Okay, the veins will carry it to the heart, or there's like the end product. It goes to the heart. So the heart's going to start its job with your blood, which has the alcohol in it. First thing it does is it pumps it to the lungs. Blood has got to be oxygenated. One of the main jobs of the heart is to get oxygenated blood oxygen to every part of itself that needs to do reactions, because oxygen is very important for that. So it's got to provide oxygen to all parts of the body. So your heart, it squeezes it squeezes the blood that came from the veins. This is blood that got it just from all over the body, got to the heart. Now it's going to start. First thing it does, get oxygen. So it pumps all that stuff to the lungs. The lungs breathes air. The air gets into the blood. The blood is now oxygenated. Notice that if you had alcohol in there, that blood is also going to be, the alcohol in the blood is going to be transferred to the inside of the lungs because nobody wants this stuff. It's not useful to the body. It's got to get rid of it. So we'll drop it for anything. We'll throw it into the lungs where it'll get breathed out, and that's what happens. It gets into the inside the lungs. The person breathes it out, and the alcohol comes out of the lungs. Now, this is important because we have breath tests that test how much alcohol is in the breath, and therefore how much alcohol was in the blood that got into the lungs. Notice, however, that this goes directly from the veins to the heart to the lungs. Didn't reach the brain yet, and that's important. Anyway, so this blood gets with the alcohol, gets pumped to the lungs, gets oxygenated. Some of the alcohol leaves, and some of it didn't manage to get out, so it goes back into it's still in the veins. In the veins now. It's still in the blood vessels. It goes back to the heart. Okay, now we've got the oxygenated blood. What's the heart's job now? Get everything in the body its oxygen. So it's going to pump. A really powerful pump goes through the aorta, in fact. It pumps that throughout the whole body, including the brain. That is when the person gets affected by the alcohol. So after it does that, again, it flows through the body. Liver gets a hold of it and tries to take care of whatever it can. again, it takes a few passes, at least a few passes, before the liver can get rid of it, can react and turn it into acetate or something like that. But anyway, it goes there. Kidneys get a hold of it. They know their job. They got to get rid of this stuff. So they try to flush it out through the urine, through the bladder and the urine and the water that flushes out the urine and the rest of the stuff. But note, this is a very important point, that it goes again. Stomach, intestines, goes to the veins. The veins get to the heart. The heart pumps it to the lungs. Now, this is before the brain got it. So the person could be testing, and show a lot of alcohol from the lungs without it affecting his brain at all. So the person might not be impaired, even though the breath test shows that there is alcohol in the breath. This is an important point. So this is, one of the chemical symbols for alcohol, called ethanol. Or anyway, the breath measurements, what they do is they take a standard of known alcoholic air. Again, usually this is done, and they see, we know this air relates to, let's say, blood alcohol content of 0.1. So then they have the subject blow continuously through this device that measures the alcohol in air, or in the breath, because he's breathing into it. But you got to remember, it's the alveolar air. Now, you might remember from biology that, or not, it doesn't matter, that the air goes into the lungs, fills up little tubes, and the very end of the tubes are small little little balls. These are alveoli. They absorb all the oxygen. They absorb all the air. So, and also when the carbon dioxide, when the air, the bad air, gets put back in the alveoli and then goes to the inside of the lungs. So alveoli is like the surface, called that. The inner surface of the lungs that actually transports oxygen in and carbon dioxide out. The good air in and the bad air out. That's the surface area. So we want the air from there, because that's where the alcohol is going to go. It's going to go from the blood into the surface, the inner surface of the lungs, the alveolar surface, or the alveolar part of the lungs. So when we measure air, we want to measure what we call alveolar air, the air that is samples from the surface of the lungs, because that's where the alcohol comes from. Now, the problem is, if the subject is smart enough, that they can just gasp clean air from the outside and immediately blow that into the detector. So that air it's not alveolar air, that's air that you just, inhaled into the top part of the lungs, let's say, and blew right back through the detector. So the detector's going to detect no alcohol, because there's no alcohol in the air. So we don't want that to happen. So we want them to go continuously for several minutes, so we know they're not just gasping air and then blowing it right through, which will actually fool the detector. So we want a good tester will be looking at the subject and seeing whether they're trying to, fool the test. So what we want is to blow continuously for a few minutes or however long it might take, to make sure we get the alveolar air, not the air they're just gasping in and blowing through. There are problems that the mouth alcohol, let's say they swish their mouth with a White Russian and they spat it out. Now, they're not going to get impaired by that, but this will cause a false positive, because there's alcohol in the mouth, and the mouth is what they breathe through to get into this device. So the evaporated alcohol from the mouth will get into there. This is, by the way, now you can't just rinse your mouth with a Cosmopolitan and get that done. It's not the only way. You can take alcohol-based mouthwash.